Drafting and Ranked is now officially coming to Pokemon Unite in the next Ring season. This video will be a short guide for drafting. I will explain the entire process, what you have to keep in mind, go over a few Pokemon to really make you understand on how the drafting will work out, and also the requirements for it, because not everyone is going to play draft mode. It's only going to be for a certain amount of players. I think they're probably just going to slowly test it and then see if they're gonna, allow more people or more players to take part in drafting. So first, going to be the next season. So season 18 will be drafting and will be introduced. And you can see right here, you need to be at least 1,400 mastering points to be able to play draft, and all 10 players have to be. So I think they're just going to be kind of like careful for now, because they don't want to scare the casual player base away. And if it has positive feedback, I'm pretty sure they're going to expand it through the entire draft mode, or maybe at least all in master rank, or maybe already starting in ultra, right? This is quite... I'm not excited about this, but I think it does make sense to maybe, test it a tiny bit, and again, see if the player base actually likes it. They're also holding a survey about it, so if you really want to have it, across the entire rank mode, try to take part in the survey. So, what is drafting? Drafting is a mode where each player picks their Pokemon one after another. So right now we have blind pick, right? All 5 players on both teams pick at the same time. You load into the match. This will be different. It will be 1 player, then 2 players again will be picking the Pokemon. You can also ban. So apparently the 2 last players now in each lobby will be banning the Pokemon, and you have 2 per team. So if those get banned, not a single player can pick them through the entire draft mode. And also, once one Pokemon is picked, the enemy can't pick it anymore. So you cannot have, Umbreon against Umbreon, Clefable against Clefable. That straight up doesn't exist anymore. So we have a nice website right here. I can also link it below, where I can showcase a bit of the drafting. So first, I don't know how the team gets chosen. That's first pick, but one team gets to choose first, and the other team gets to choose second. That, of course, has positives and negatives to each, right? So the team on the left can pick, a strong Pokemon first after the bans, but then the other team also has a very strong last deciding pick that can maybe counter everything of the other team. So for example, Trainer 1 or like here, Trainer 4 will do the first ban, and Trainer 4 decides to ban what's something you want to ban right now. Maybe Clefable. So Trainer 4 decides to ban Clefable. Then a Trainer 9 is gonna ban maybe bans his own teammates or something, ban Cinderace. And then a Trainer 5, it's gonna be a lot about personal preference. And this team is like, yeah, we're gonna ban, Umbreon. I think Umbreon is probably gonna be one of the most popular bans. Definitely Clefable as well. Very strong Pokemon. But I can also imagine something like Cinderace being banned even from your own teammates. That can definitely happen too. Then Team 2 decides to ban again, and they decide to go for maybe a Inteleon. Inteleon also still quite strong right now, right? So they end up banning Inteleon, if I can find it right here, because these are not ordered by names, I think. There we go, Inteleon. So now, after this is done, Team 1 can now pick the first Pokemon, and we cannot pick Clefable, we cannot pick Umbreon, we cannot pick Inteleon, and we cannot pick Cinderace. And Trainer 1 is like, alright, I'm gonna decide to go for... This already matters a lot. So in this slot, you don't want to pick something that gets countered, right? You don't want to. So you don't want to pick something that's like, oh wow, if I pick this into this, I'm already in a quite good position. So something like Zoroark can be quite risky to first pick, as they now can pick maybe easy point and click stunts. That's something you might not want to do. But just in case they do it, there we go. They first pick Zoroark. Now this team can decide what do they want to pick, and it's going to keep on going. Let's say they got Mewtwo's open again, they're going to pick up Mewtwo. Those are allowed again. And maybe, a defender or something. But it could also happen that your team just goes like SP on Mew, enemy team, picks a support like Hooper, maybe Lucario or Leafeon, and then your team goes for full attacker, right? Like, this definitely can happen, that your team goes full attacker, and that's just gonna be it. But of course, you want to try for this not to happen, right? You want to pick, first on, if you're in the Trainer 1 to Trainer 3 position here, or Trainer 6 to Trainer 8, you want to pick Pokemon that are strong on their own without being countered much. We'll also talk about it in a second. I have a bit of a tier list on which Pokemon I think you can pick early on, but that's pretty much it. And then you have a bit of time window to adjust your items, your entire like setup, battle item, head items, which is very, very good. And then, for these picks, you want to, for like Trainer 4, 5 on left side, Trainer 9, 10, you kind of want to think about either something that rounds out the team comp. So for example, on the right side, they might need another, bit of more damage maybe, or another melee and you want to kind of adjust towards your teammates. So if your teammates are like 3 damage dealers, 1 support, maybe you can consider like a defender, right, as your last pick. So try to think a bit about what fits your team comp, right? Having a defender. I mean, already that should be happening right now, right? In blind pick, it should be the same. But I do hope that draft kind of makes people realize more about team comps. I hope it's also going to get more people to watching tournaments and try to copy what the pros do when it comes to playing and picking these Pokemon a tiny bit more. It doesn't have to be, you know, just Inteleon every game. But I would like to have, like, you know, maybe 2 attacker, 1 all-rounder, 1 defender, 1 support or something in a team for it to be fine. So, like, for example, the right team could lose a bit more engage maybe still. So could pick like a Machamp, right? We have Mewtwo as a jungler, we have strong laning. And this is a very well thought of, I feel like, team comp for solo queue or for ranked. And left side is the classic solo queue team, but also, of course, can still win, right? It can always happen. But I think for good players, again, it will be quite good because you can adjust towards your opponents. And if you're a smart player as well, you just pick something that doesn't get countered or too easily if you're up higher, you know, on the pick priority. So let's go over the different roles and which Pokemon I think you can pick quite early on without having to worry too much about it, and the ones you probably should be picking a bit later on as they have a few more counters, right? So pretty much safe picks can also just be, you know, S tier Pokemon, right? If your Pokemon is S tier, then it's going to be totally fine to probably pick it early on. So tier lists as well are going to matter a lot when it comes to drafting. Pick S tier, A tier Pokemon, of course, as early as possible. But in general, I just want to make sure to get your understanding on like which Pokemon are fine to pick whenever you want. Buzzwole, pretty much always fine. It's just very strong Pokemon right now. Again, this is kind of like just being a strong Pokemon. I think Machamp is always a good choice. Necessarily or not always a good choice, but is always safe. Doesn't really have a lot of counters, and it just allows you to have engage. Lucario is very versatile. Dragonite in central area doesn't really get countered. Urshifu same. And Zacian, Mewtwo, I mean, are the 2 EX Pokemon, and they're pretty much always safe. Central area Pokemon are mainly safe, but not always as well. So I want to make sure you're up against, you know, different Pokemon there. Metagross, I think, is pretty versatile and might want to be a bit of a later pick, actually, though. So might want to go down here. And Azumarill, I think, is also quite safe. Garchomp, I feel like wants more melees on the enemy team. For Charizard, you have to watch out for Unstoppables, right? Same for Serena. Like, these can be quite rough if the enemies have, like, a Wigglytuff. You definitely don't want to pick, like, Charizard or Serena potentially into those Pokemon, right? Tyranitar, you gotta make sure the enemies, you know, enemy team doesn't have the strongest early game. Scizor is a good counter pick. That's why he's a late pick. Like, you don't want to pick it early on. But Scizor, not Scyther. Scizor is great later on because he counters physical attack Pokemon. So if the enemies have a lot of physical attack, you can consider picking Scizor. Blaziken can struggle against the range, so I also want to pick a bit later on. I think Mimikyu in general is fine, but sometimes if the enemies are a bit too tanky, I think it can be quite of a struggle to get those resets in. This is just a bad Pokemon right now, probably shouldn't even pick it. Scyther is alright, but also should be a later pick. It needs to assassinate enemy Pokemon for resets. Gyarados needs the enemies to have weak early game for it to be useful, and same kind of for Aegislash. Aegislash can be a bit maybe safe, but sometimes the laning phase can be quite rough. So if the enemies have very strong laning, very strong path Pokemon, you know, it can be quite of a struggle. Cramorant, I think, is always decent. Pikachu can always get something done. Duraludon, Espeon, like all these attacker just always kind of work. You can always adjust their builds, right? You can play Icy Wind if you want to for a dash. You can play Icicle Spear. Stop Pulse, Psybeam is always good. Duraludon has mobility, good auto take damage. Pikachu can be good against speedsters, can be good against mages. So you can always adjust, right? You can pick them early on, and then you can adjust your build after you saw what your enemy picked. Same for Gardevoir, you can decide to go for Moonblast or Psychic. You can go for Mystical Fire or Hyper Voice. Dragapult, just a good Pokemon right now for Central. Same for Mewtwo still, probably. Inteleon is always a good choice. Mew is always doesn't really have a lot of counters. Venusaur also an optimal, like, late pick as well. Oh no, it's a safe pick. So, safe pick as well is, like, if the Pokemon, like, you know, these two, or Pikachu, or Glaceon, or Gardevoir, or Sylveon have, like, multiple builds, they're kind of safe to pick, right? Because you can always adjust. Are the enemies more melee, have a lot of dive? Well, then you just go Paladins. Have the enemies more range, you can go for Solar Beam, so you're pretty much always fine. Same for Chandelure. If the enemies have a lot of melee and dive, you can just go for Overheat and Prison. And if the enemies have a lot of range, you can just go for Flamethrower. So these are just optimal safe picks in that regard. And for later picks, you know, like Cinderace and stuff, they can be quite vulnerable to a lot of, like, range. Greninja as well, Delphox and Ninetales. Like, if the enemies have a lot of range or something, they can be quite bad to play sometimes. So these are kind of picks I would probably just pick a bit later on. Decidueye also great if the enemies, like, he's good to counter, like, you know, he's good as a counter for, like, Ninetales, for, like, Delphox, for Dragapult or something. I mean, Dragapult can kind of sneak up on him. But, like, Decidueye is a good last pick to outrange enemy Pokemon. But if the enemies have a very melee-heavy dive draft, right, and there's like all in you all the time, then a Sidroy, of course, is not a great choice. So I would say he's like a good counter pick late on. So like late pick can also mean counter pick at the same time, right? Safe pick, you can pick them without having to worry much about them. You can adjust your build towards your opponents, and then late pick is either because your Pokemon gets countered or because it counters others, right? So next up, we have Speedsters. Leafeon is pretty much always safe. I think Zeraora doesn't really care about what the enemies have too much. Same for Talon and Dodrio. I think they're always like fine choices if you want to play a good Speedster. These are definitely right. Gengar, definitely. He does have Hex and Sludge Bomb and Dream Eater Shadow Ball, depending on what the enemies have. But I feel like it still doesn't feel all too amazing. Most players don't want to play 2 Gengar builds at the same time. They always prefer one. So it can be a good counter pick. Like looking at the enemy team comp, if they have a lot of squishies, right, you can pick Gengar. Absol can also be quite rough sometimes if the enemies have a lot of point and click. Same for Zoroark, Amuse-Garada as well. If the enemies are very, very tanky, it can be quite difficult to make a lot happen. But I think it's a good counter pick towards certain enemy Pokemon. And for last defender, I think, you know, these are always safe choices. Blastoise, Slowbro, Umbreon, Snorlax are great choices. They have a lot of flexibility and are pretty much always decent. Blastoise can go 2 different builds. Slowbro can go 2 different builds. Umbreon is Umbreon, right? And Snorlax is just a very safe, good defender that has Engage. Trevenant, I think, can be a bit later just because if the enemies have a lot of range, he actually feels quite bad. Like, have you ever played Trevenant against like 5 attacker? You will know how bad it feels to play Trevenant. And again, 5 attacker can also happen in draft. So don't be like, oh, it's not gonna happen, I'm just gonna pick normal Pokemon. No, it can be also 5 attacker. Crust is a great counter towards certain Pokemon, but if the enemies have a lot of dashes, it can be also quite difficult. Definitely something I would pick maybe later on. Same for Mamoswine. But I think it's quite like good counter pick to certain melees, and Green, Gudra, and Lapras. I think Lapras is a good pick if your team lacks Engage. Otherwise, the other defenders are just better choices. But if your team doesn't have Engage, right, and someone has to like start a fight, Lapras can be a great last choice. I think Gudra needs a bit of a slower enemy team, and you also, if the enemies have a lot of range Pokemon, a lot of damage, it can feel quite bad to play. It does have 2 different builds, so it could also be up here. But I think in general, if the enemy is like Muddy Water against 4 attacker or something, or like against some backline, can also feel quite bad. And like playing Gudra into Trevenant or something also feels quite painful. So something I would pick later on. And for supports, Blissey, Clefable, Hooper, I think are always good choices. Nothing wrong with them. And then for later on, Mr. Mime, if you lack Engage, and if you don't have good laning, I think Mr. Mime can always make your bot path or top path stronger. Wigglytuff is a great counter pick towards what I mentioned earlier as well, for example, the Charizard or Serena. It's also a good counter pick towards Blastoise, because it negates the entire thing. If you have a mage in your lane, like if you want to set up maybe a Future Sight or something, or Psyshock or whatever, it's a great choice for your team. But I would say first you want to look at your team and the enemy team to decide to pick Wigglytuff. And same for Sableye and same for Comfey, right? Like Comfey is a Pokemon that needs someone that's strong with Comfey, and if doesn't, then it's gonna be a bad Pokemon. I hope you guys look forward towards drafting. I do for sure. Let me know if this guide was useful, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!